This episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by either agitating yourself into a state of paralyzing paranoia or numbing yourself into a psychic callus.
We live in a terrifying, scary world, being watched constantly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every minute of every hour, every action we take is recorded, logged, and stored in order to be held against us. And as a result of knowing that and extrapolating the worst possible outcomes from it, I have worked myself into a paralyzing paranoia.
I've taken a little bit of a different route. I think we have to ask the broad question, is it really so bad? Is there really so much going on? But for the parts that we do know for sure, things like advertising tracking, the capabilities of the surveillance state, my phone tracks where I go and I can turn it off, but I don't really know if it's really turned off. And Stingray devices can pick up my telephone signals and my phone call could be recorded. What I do is I just like the frog getting boiled. I've heard these things slowly over time and I've tried to numb myself into a psychic callus, get used to the idea, oh, well, you know, this is part of technology, so it seems normal and inevitable.
For me, closing my eyes, even for a moment, even for my own mental well-being, just isn't an option. You need to be constantly calculating, imagining someone just over your shoulder, just on the other side of a camera, watching, logging, controlling, puppeting. It's important to look that reality square in the eyes, even if it means that I can no longer function as a normal person day to day.
For me, that day-to-day functioning is really important, and so I've built a strategy that relies on not remembering things that were disclosed about the nature of online surveillance, even while acknowledging in many ways it is true, pretending that it's not true. That works for me. So obviously the two of us, we've got a lot of big differences on this, but one thing we do agree on is there's only two options.
Agitating yourself into a paralyzing paranoia or numbing yourself with a psychic callus. Proud sponsor of today's episode of Seriously Wrong.
Hey, hello, howdy, what's up, how do you do? And this is the Seriously Wrong podcast. Woo! Everyone's
Yay! Brought to you by the Seriously Wrong Surveillance Network. We like to think of ourselves as kind of a giant mechanical octopus, and at the end of each arm there is an eyeball. And those arms extend into every home in the world.
Absolutely. I'm your surveillor-in-chief, Sean.
I'm Aaron.
Actually, we do a comedy and politics podcast called Seriously Wrong, which you're already listening to, and the majority of you do not need to be introduced to. But this week we're talking about surveillance in general, but in specific technological government and other means, but especially technological. You know, we're going to talk a lot about some of the different surveillance norms and capabilities that exist in our current world. There's always this paradox of like, we need to be sufficiently agitated to call for political change around this, but we can't get so agitated that we're afraid to have inaction. So we're going to try to balance that really well. But at the same time, I do want to raise kind of a warning flag that from my analysis of this, I'm worried that the vast array of technological surveillance tools that exist with microphones and cameras in every home and every pocket around the world on a connected information communications network that's global is sort of a fertile ground for the possibility of a techno-fascist cyberpunk dystopia. Not that we're there and not that it's inevitable, but that some of the tools that are just part of our banal everyday lives now and we're psychically numbed to recognizing are around us because they're normalized. And we rely on them also. Tools that exist now placed in the wrong hands for the wrong reasons at the wrong times, it strikes me as like a genuine threat to the future of free humanity.
Yeah, I think people kind of know in the back of your mind, you know that whatever you do on the internet is being tracked, probably by multiple different companies, depending on, you know, which websites or which apps you're using, which browsers you're using, what things are installed on those websites, what kind of phone you have. The company that created your phone can be collecting different data about you. But it all, I think for a lot of people, feels kind of vague and distant and like, oh, maybe they're just using it to sell me advertisements. It's not really that big of a deal. But I think while in the current situation, you may not be feeling the effects of these things immediately, I think it's important to look at, the actual technological capabilities that are already in what I would consider the wrong hands. I don't think big, unaccountable corporations and government entities should be the ones shepherding us through this technological revolution, creating this planetary-wide nervous system of different sensors, microphones, databases. Like, maybe they want to do some slightly good things with it, but for the most part, I don't really trust big, giant, faceless, unaccountable organizations to watch me and collect data about me and use it only for good. So it's important to look at what the capabilities are and to also like extrapolate worst case scenarios of like what could a brutally repressive authoritarian fascist world government do with this kind of thing. Or none, it doesn't have to be world government.
Yeah, it could even be regional governments.
Regional
could
governments.
Be municipal and still be horrific.
Could just be a tech monopoly that has a monopoly on one specific thing, like search engines or something.
Yeah, and I think you're right to say, like, in a way, we could say this is already in the wrong hands, but it's also on the spectrums of how wrong hands can get. They're not in the wrongest hands yet, as far as I can tell. And I can imagine certainly wronger and wronger hands still, that this technology would be used even more wrongly than it already is. But yeah, I think first, let's talk about what are the stakes of privacy for the average person. I think like the cliche is you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. People might say, well, this stuff is only used to catch terrorists and pedophiles. Like these are the best tools we have to prevent there from being spree killings, to prevent children from being abused and so on. The negative side of having all your data scooped up is worth the shiny benefit of catching terrorists before they kill innocent people.
Yeah, if we can prevent all child sexual abuse, then do I really care if my browser data is in some giant database somewhere and an AI is crawling it in order to see if I'm Googling anything sus? Maybe not, but I mean, first of all, I don't think we've prevented a lot of spree killings or
yeah, maybe there's some unknown amount that we have been prevented through this, but it's clear that they're getting through on all fronts. Everything we've just described is somehow getting through this global surveillance dragnet. When I was involved in the Pirate Party of Canada, we're advocating for an open internet for the purposes of free and unfettered file sharing and so on. And then in order to crack down on file sharing, they'd say, well, we're going to track all internet traffic to catch bad guys. And if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear was like the common way that this was articulated by politicians at the time that we had this wave of repressive legislation around internet mass surveillance in the early 2010s. And key to understand is that every single one of us has things to hide in life. Like having secrets is part of the fabric of life. And they're not big secrets, but they are important secrets. There's a reason that we don't share every aspect of who we are with everyone we meet. There's a reason that we don't talk the same way to our boss we talk to our friends. There's a reason you might have a conversation with one friend instead of another. And all of those things are secrets. All of those things are things to hide. What I say in a private conversation with someone is something to hide. It's not a severe thing to hide. If it came out 9 times out of 10, it's something that can be overcome through dialogue or whatever. For example, you're not a murderer. You're not planning a terrorist attack. You have, quote, nothing to hide, according to these like extreme barriers or whatever. But like sometimes you're like venting about your coworker annoying you or whatever. But your coworker is a sweet old lady too, like you'd never shit on her to her, but she keeps on doing this thing that's annoying. And so you tell your friend about it. And it's like, congratulations, you have something to hide.
I think too, this is partially the reason why I think a lot of streamers live in a sort of dystopia, because they're actively being recorded for 8 whatever hours a day, and then those things are saved as clips and they exist as part of an eternal present where everything you said when you were like being recorded for this long period of time can be posted as a clip of at any time. And it's like, look at this thing you're currently saying right now. It's like you can't move on from these things because they just always exist. And that kind of exists anytime you record yourself, but at least with what we do, we can like curate, we edit, we think about what we want to say beforehand. We're not just like broadcasting live for 10 hours a day and then having all of that archived on an ongoing basis to be shoved back in your face at any time. Yeah, there's something awful about everything being recorded and it being able to be used against you, whether or not it actually does end up being used against you. The fact that it exists or that you have to be reminded of it or have it shoved back in your face over and over again, I think is kind of like a horrifying nightmare that I don't really want to live in. And now it's time for scenes from somebody's utopia. Now, this isn't our utopia, but it is somebody's utopia.
Hey, you know what I really like about this wonderful world we live in? Everything is recorded forever about everyone's lives. It's like a completed library. It's like everything in its right place.
Nothing is ever lost. Everything is logged. Everything is kept forever, safe and held. It's beautiful. It allows us to get a picture of everything that's happening at all times. We know all statistics. Nobody can ever betray anyone or lie to anyone.
You got to be the same person to everyone in every conversation. If you say something to one person, you can't tweak it slightly to people please. It's all in the public record. And one of the cool things about that is that we're defined by that. We're defined by what we did, not just this week and the week before, but for our whole lives. For example, I know that when you lost your temper in 1996, you said those unkind things to your now ex-partner. I see a dimension of you that you might have tried to hide from me, which would have been wrong.
Yeah, I did that. I said unkind things. I was a monster. And that lives on forever in a sort of eternal present. And that will forever define me.
Yeah, I get to know really who you are.
And, you know, it can be big things like that, big emotional moments. It can even be smaller things. Like I know that you were a kid who liked to pick your nose and eat it. And in fact, there's 29 confirmed instances during your life, and they're all logged. I know what ages they happened at. I know people teased you about it. That's probably a sore spot for you. It's good to know all that about you.
Yeah, no, and I think if I was trying to run from the fact that I was, and in some ways still am, a booger eater, I think I would be dehumanizing myself to reject that aspect of my full, vibrant human existence.
And even if you haven't done it for years, it is still what you are.
Yeah, no, and when you were younger, you had a much more edgy and vulgar sense of humor, and you
guilty.
You said a lot of things. Well, actually, we've got clips of them that we can play on our phones at any time, any of us.
Yeah. And if you chose to do that right now, that would be fair. If I haven't done it in 20 years, what does that mean? I still did it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's the difference between 20 years ago and now? It's part of the total whole.
Remember that time you carelessly left a banana peel out and then your great aunt slipped on it and broke her hip?
Right. Yeah, no, she died in the hospital. And yeah, what a careless mistake I made. And that's something that I don't have the right to forget. I don't have the right to not be reminded of. And even from people that I'm meeting for the first time, that might show up in the AI-generated summary of key life events.
It would be fair if it did, because they might want to know, oh, I need to be careful around this person. They're so careless, they caused the death of a loved one. Crucial information.
Yeah, and I know things like, you at the grocery store, you got frustrated with a slow-walking senior citizen. No fault of her own, she walked slow, but you muttered under your breath insulting things to her, and she knows that, and I know that, and your future employers know that.
It's out there, it's logged. It allows people to love every side of you, even the things that aren't so pretty. It's like that month that you spent Googling fart porn every day. And you said it was for research for an essay.
And I got caught in that lie. No, I was masturbating.
The cameras logged it. It was,
And anyone can pull that clip up, and that's fine.
Let's just get it all out there.
Yeah, and what's wrong with
it forever?
What's wrong with something like that if it's consensual, right? And
no moral issue with it. It's just a bit humiliating.
Right. No, and like if I'm going to the store and the cashier chuckles seeing me, the much younger female cashier, because she's seen that on my public record using her augmented reality.
Yeah, it popped up when she scanned your rewards card.
And I could guess that, but then also I get to know that because I get to read her text messages. And she says, oh, fart porn guy came again. He's so pathetic.
Yeah, and you can even see that that's an ugliness in her, that she's so judgmental of you. And calling you fart porn guy, that's a bit rude. I wouldn't nickname you based on this one thing. It lives on in the eternal present as well. It should, but doesn't mean you have to call people names. So we can rightly judge that clerk about her judgmental text messages.
Yeah, and that's what she has to live with. And that's the thing is, it all balances, it all comes out to zero.
Yeah.
Because we all have follies and we all have our own limitations. And
it really is a perfect society we live in. All right, folks, that is it for this teaser. If you want to hear the rest of this episode, head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/seriouslywrong, and you can support the show, help us out, and get access to this full episode and a whole bunch more bonus episodes, the full archive, our Discord server, our book club, all kinds of stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for donating, and we will see you again soon.